Well, welcome back, everyone. And hello to those of you who are joining us online. So please, give us a cheer if you're sitting with someone new here at this lunch. All right. We're getting there. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I am so pleased to take this moment in, and for many, a big highlight for this conference. This is the moment when we get to hear from some of the world's premier CF doctors and researchers about the latest in science, our medical and research panel luncheon. To participate in the Q&A portion of this session, we have some instructions for everyone. For those of you here in person, please take out your phones, and you're going to open up that VLC app that we talked about earlier. You'll select the medical and research panel on the main stage, and from there you can submit questions and chat alongside our virtual audience. And for those of you online, Q&A is integrated into the stage you are currently watching. Navigate to the Q&A tab in the chat bar on the right-hand side of your screen, and your questions are welcome. Now it is my pleasure to invite Mike Boyle back to the stage to lead the medical and research panel. Yeah, I know, we talked it.
All right, well, let's keep our momentum going. But let's start off by just saying thank you to Maureen and Brian. They're really getting us off to a good start. All right, time to move to one of certainly my favorite, and I think probably all of our favorites, as one of the parts of this conference, which is it's the opportunity to really dive in deep on some of the details and highlight some of the incredible progress being made in CF research and in care. We're going to take questions at the end of this presentation, but feel free to submit them as you go. We may not get to every question, but we do our best. And we want to make this interactive, right? We're going to do a little presentations, but then we want to answer some of your questions. So I'm going to start by inviting some distinguished colleagues onto the stage. Come on out, guys.
Yeah, you got a friend.
There's the mark, you see.
Well, I think we all know that one of the ways to be really successful is to build an amazing leadership team. And that's the thing I can say with absolute conviction is we have an amazing science and care leadership team at the foundation. Actually, throughout the leadership team, so grateful. But I'm going to tell you a couple details about these three because they're going to be talking to you today. So first we're going to introduce Dr. Stephen Rowe, who everybody knows. And Steve joined the foundation in 2022 as our Chief Scientific Officer. And most people, if you've been involved in CF, you know Steve, right? He's respected globally as a leader in CF research, brings more than 2 decades of experience to this role. Served as a principal investigator for the first triple combination therapy, Trikafta, which we know has transformed the lives of so many people in the CF community. As Chief Scientific Officer, Steve oversees our basic and clinical research and leads the Foundation's research strategy, as well as the venture philanthropy program that we use to use our investments to develop innovative new therapies for people with cystic fibrosis. And then next is Dr. Whitney Brown. Also, we're so grateful to have her as our leader on our team. She's the Vice President of Clinical Affairs at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. If you go back in 2010, Dr. Brown joined the INOVA, which is in Virginia, Advanced Lung Disease and Transplant Program in Falls Church, Virginia, and founded that adult CF program there at INOVA. In July of 2021, we were excited that she was willing to come join us at the foundation and obviously with her expertise support the evolving needs of the CF Care Center network and the growing population of individuals living longer with CF, adults with CF, her area of expertise. Dr. Brown continues to see patients with CF every week at INOVA. This is a commitment that she's kept to because I know it just continually energizes and informs her work at the foundation, informs us to really have that continued exposure. And then last, somebody that everybody knows and loves, that's Dr. J.P. Clancy, right? A pediatric pulmonologist, our Senior Vice President of Clinical Research at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And JP's roles at the foundation include oversight of all those multi-center clinical research trials that you hear about conducted by the CF Therapeutic Development Network, our big research network. and also support of global clinical research networks. I don't know if you realize this, but the foundation supports clinical trial networks in Europe, in the UK, in Australia, all to be able to speed up the development of drugs, and JP oversees all of those. He also oversees our physician science training programs and our career development programs, as well as other clinical research resources. So anyway, now you know why I say we have such a great team. We're going to get to hear about from each of them, and then we're going to go through questions, and maybe I'll start off by Steve. Will you come up and kick us off?
Great. Great. Thanks, Mike. Really happy to be here. It's really true that this meeting is the heart of the mission, and it's really nice to get retouched with that heart. It gets more and more fun for me as I get to know more and more of you for this. In fact, as a proof of that, I'll tell you a story, and that is I have broken my cardinal rule. I broke my cardinal rule and checked a bag just to make room for the boots so I can meet you on the dance floor. So I look forward to that a little later. And I want to thank KC for her inspiring words to start today, and Mike for sharing the story I didn't know about the Chat GPT search about the role for the CF Foundation. I didn't know it. I can't say I'm completely shocked, but I am so proud and inspired to see that and see that sort of affirmation, and really most of all, grateful. I'm grateful because it just helps remind me and remind us that it's really the working together part that has made this really special. So it's really nice to be here and reconnect with you. And it's an important time to do so because science and research is really under critical challenges right now. Those challenges are substantial. It's aside from just the realities of trying to do a genetic cure for a systemic disease, something that has not yet been accomplished for any disease. There's serious challenges to NIH funding. That provides the support for our academic partners that generate the concepts we need to bring drugs to people. The FDA and their approval process, and the cloud over the biotech industry all represent challenges that are not fully under our control. In the spirit of Texas, it feels a bit like we're trying to ride the bucking bronco. But I can assure you that we will ride this bronco. We are persistent. We are persistent because we will not be deterred by results that don't meet our initial expectations. We weren't deterred when Orkambi was somewhat successful, but not the sort of transformative therapy that we wanted. Or looked at the 6 or so modulators, many of which I was involved with, that preceded that we don't talk about anymore. And we are resilient. We are unafraid to adjust our approach based on emerging results. I fully expect that we will have to do that as the results come in with the early genetic therapies. And we've done it before. We thought we were going to be able to cure Delta F508 with one drug. And of course, it's required multiple drugs to be able to do that. And finally, we are determined. We are determined. We know that with you, we will do what is needed to provide the steady hand to the research community and the vision to ultimately help conquer this disease. We have been and will continue to be the best in the world with your help. And we've been busy. Here's a look at the spectrum of CF research across the portfolio, and we are really touching all of these areas, and I'll only be able to share a few vignettes. One on our work in anti-infectives to try and bring new treatments to address manifestations of CF now. We also have work in other CF manifestations that are affecting the day-to-day lives of people with CF, those that they bring up with their doctors at each moment or each doctor visit, such as CF diabetes or mental health problems, or even pancreatic insufficiency. We continue to make substantial work in CFTR restoration and CFTR modulator therapy as represented by the new approval this year. And of course, I'll focus on our work in Path to a Cure. This is how we do this work. This is a look at our support across the research portfolio. And the first thing to point out, of course, is that this is a lot of support from your help that we're able to do that. $224 million spent last year across a variety of aspects that we showed on the previous slide. treating CF manifestations, sometimes we forget about, because we don't talk about it as much, is actually the number one there. So you know that we are trying to intervene in each of these areas, and also substantial support that's growing for the Path to a Cure initiatives to try and develop genetic treatments. Because we know that we have to work at an unbridled pace to bring transformational therapy to those that do not have it. And of course, the rubber meets the road for us where funding reaches reality across our pipeline. And of course, we already had an outstanding number of 16 approved therapies. That number is now 17. Take a moment to pat yourself on the back for helping us and enable that. 500 new people with CF that wouldn't otherwise be eligible for CFTR modulators can now receive that more than ever. And more global impact as that work reaches more and more countries. And we're also active in mucus clearance, anti-inflammatory therapies, anti-infective therapies, and nutrition and GI, each of those with approved drugs and robust pipelines that you can see below that for drugs that are currently in development in various stages of disease. I'll take a moment to focus on the Path to a Cure and those that are now reaching people. These are our first attempts to try and take genetic therapy to those individuals that we see and that we hear that are without CFTR modulator therapy, without a drug that is altering the progression of their disease. We're doing so in this first attempt in several ways. They may be the sorts of results that we saw with Orkambi, a first attempt or a first proof of concept, but not yet the transformation. But I can promise you that we will learn from these experiences to try and take what's needed and from that knowledge to ultimately accomplish our goals of the cure. One of these that we're excited about is, of course, the mRNA therapies. That's why we've invested in 3 different partnerships that are testing varieties of the lipid nanoparticles with mRNA therapy. This is the same sort of technology that really helped halt the pandemic for those that were most vulnerable, including people with CF. And instead of injecting it into your arm muscle, these LNPs encoding the CFTR molecule are being inhaled. We now have patients with CF, people with CF that are involved in these trials in all 3 of those programs, and we look forward to seeing those results, learning them from them, and adjusting to do what's needed. It also making big strides in gene addition therapy. You can see we have 3 different programs at the bottom of the slide where we're using viruses programmed to deliver a fully functional CFTR gene into the lung. These sort of therapies are not science fiction. They've been used to help other genetic diseases. One of those, for example, used the same sort of virus that we're using for the lung to take people with a genetic cause of blindness and inject a single injection of a virus that encodes for the gene that corrects the cause of their blindness, and they are able to read the newspaper afterwards. So we're building on that sort of experience to try and do genetic therapy to the lung and deliver CFTR. Now, it's going to be more challenging. The eye is an easier place to accomplish that. The lung is harder. But we'll learn from this experience, and we're doing more and more integration with the companies that are in this area. This is not a fund and forget mentality. We are in the trenches with them, helping design their studies, helping adapt to the results, and do what's needed to try and bring these across the finish line. That same sort of logic is driving us towards paving the way for the challenges ahead to ultimately get to the cure. And this is the sort of foundational work that we're doing with our partners in academic research environments, as well as small biotechs, to try and discover what is needed to get to our ultimate goal of gene editing. And let me tell you about how we're charting new territory. We're as excited as ever about the potential in this regard when we see new results, including those that we shared at the North American CF Conference, where diseases like sickle cell anemia can be cured with genetic treatment if you're willing to take cells out of the body, fix them, and put them back in. Of course, that approach won't quite work for people with CF, but this sort of technology is advancing extremely rapidly. And that's why we enlisted the support in the last year and a half of 2 companies that are at the frontier of accomplishing gene editing in people. And that includes our partnership with Prime Medicine, as well as Recode Therapeutics, who we already work with on the mRNA therapy, to try and do this in the lung. And so let me tell you a little bit more about that, in particular, this technology called prime editing and what it means. This is where we're essentially using molecular scissors to try and get into the person's DNA in their body and swap out one or a handful of single bases, singular nucleotides in that enormous genetic code. And what we can now do in the laboratory is use this sort of gene editor to precisely swap out one or two bases and fully correct the CFTR gene in those cells, the same sort of cells that provide the roadmap for the success of CFTR modulator therapy, and do so with the sort of efficiency needed that we think will make a real difference in people with CF. And we're also avoiding touching other genes in those same cells that we know we need to avoid to be able to successfully implement this in clinic. So this is really a harbinger of and a green light for being able to think about doing what's needed next to make this a conceptual understanding that we've gained with our collaborators and bring that to people. Precision medicine brought to bear to deliver a cure for people with CF. I only have a few minutes, so I do want to tell you one other vignette of what we're doing in the anti-infective space. And this, of course, is really important to us because for many people with CF, this is what bothers them. Every day they wake up, this is what bothers them, and they need to talk to their physician on their monthly care visits. And so we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to try and develop transformative therapies in this area. We already have great antimicrobials that can be used if people need to be hospitalized or in inhaled fashion, but we needed to do more for an important concept. And that's why we supported a company called ClareMedix, which is doing this. Let me tell you about this. The reason that we are able to cure infection in the CF lung is because of a problem called biofilm. A biofilm is basically like a slime that bacteria make, and they do so in the CF lung more than many, many other infectious diseases. And this is why when people go in for an exacerbation or when people inhale antibiotics on a daily basis, it only kills the bacteria that are free. The bacteria that are protected by the slime, by the biofilm, the antibiotics never reach, and they're actually sharing genes to make sure that they stay resistant and are very difficult. If we could combat the biofilm, we have the potential to eradicate the bacteria infection and really generate results that are conceptually not possible right now. And in fact, working with ClareMedix, they've developed an antibody technology that attacks the biofilm itself. It attacks the slime to break it up. It loosens the bacteria so they become individual bacteria for which we already have antibiotics ready to go to then kill them. So we are already now doing the experiments that have shown that this monoclonal antibody works against Pseudomonas, the most important bacteria for people with CF. It breaks up their biofilm and makes the antibiotics work tremendously better. And we're supporting this proof of concept study in people. It's also being put forward in people with certain causes of pneumonia where biofilm is a real problem. So all this to share that we are determined to do what it takes to innovate in new ways despite the challenges of the environment, and with your help, we will continue to work until it's done. Thank you very much. Next, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Dr. Whitney Brown, Vice President for Clinical Affairs, to tell you about her outstanding work for us in the community. Whitney.
Thanks, Steve. All right. It's wonderful to be with you today in person and online. So we're going to talk a little bit about care, and I want to start with who is receiving care these days. And so this is a figure that's generated based on our U.S. CF Foundation patient registry, and it shows us the proportion of our population in this country that are children versus adults. And if you look on the left, in the year 2000, over 60% of our population were children. In about 2013, the number of children and adults equalized, and now we know that the inverse is true. Over 60% of our population are adults. Yeah, I think we can clap. And if we look at the projections into the future, we can see that the adult population is going to continue to age. and grow. And by the year 2040, we'll probably be over 70% of our CF population. And this is really a success story, and it's a testament to our successful CF care model and the many treatment advances that have been made possible over the last 25 years. So I think this is amazing, amazing story. But it has us thinking. We need to be prepared to provide excellent care for this growing adult population, and we need to be ensuring that the kids, by the time they get to adulthood, are in the best shape they can to live long and healthy lives. So if we're thinking about the lifespan of someone with CF, it starts with diagnosis. And ideally, diagnosis happens as early in life as possible. And this is the reason for CF newborn screening. And this map here shows us, you can see the different patterns on the states. CF newborn screening in this country is provided at the state level, and it is highly variable with 38 different algorithms across the 50 states. This amount of variability means that some states are testing for only one mutation when there's a positive CF newborn screen, and others are testing for over 600 mutations. And this means that an infant born in one state might have a delayed diagnosis compared to someone born in another state, and this is not acceptable. And the importance of this is because the sooner the accurate diagnosis of CF is made, the sooner appropriate care can be received. And we know that this care makes a difference in outcomes down the line, such as future lung function, nutritional status, and sets you up for success. And we've been really focused on improving newborn screening for CF here at the CF Foundation, and here are the 3 focus areas. And as Dr. Boyle mentioned this morning, the publication this week of the CF newborn screening guideline was really a huge milestone and represents about 3 years of work. And we need the guideline because public health labs in each of the states look to a guideline to know what is the best practice, what they should be shooting for. And the guideline lays out 7 different recommendations of how testing should be done and how it should be communicated when it's positive. And we know that these changes, having the guideline is a great start, but we know that these changes will take time and won't happen overnight. So we are prepared to continue to support and quality improvement efforts. We have grant funding that's available to CF care teams who partner with their newborn state labs and work on the newborn screening improvement in their states. And we have our policy and advocacy team that's working around the country to raise awareness of now this newly published guideline and push for changes across the country. And speaking of changes, I feel like Dr. Boyle stole a little bit of my thunder this morning, but I think repetition is always good. And so let's talk about some of the important changes that came out from the FDA on December 20th of last year. And there were 3 things. The first was the expansion of the Trikafta label, meaning 94 additional mutations were added to the approved mutation list for the label. And that was made possible by theratyping. And just as a reminder, theratyping is where a therapy or medication is tested in tissue from a person, but in a laboratory, not in a clinical trial. And that can be extremely helpful for rare mutations, improving that the therapies work on rare mutations without having to go through all of those individuals in a clinical trial. The second major announcement that day was the approval of the second triple modulator therapy, Alyftrek. And I have the chemical names up there. I don't know if you can see it, but it's very similar to Trikafta, but one of the medications, Elexacaftor from Trikafta, has been switched out for another small molecule called vanzacaftor in Trikafta. And the ivacaftor part has now been engineered to be long-acting form. So this means Alyftrek is a once-daily medication, which is important because a lot of people are missing those evening doses. This Alyftrek was tested head-to-head in a trial against Trikafta to prove that it worked equally well. And it did work equally well in the clinical trials over 6 months in terms of lung function, nutrition, symptoms, and not getting sick. And as Dr. Boyle suggested, or mentioned earlier, that the trial suggested that the group on Alyftrek had slightly more normal or less salty sweat chloride tests than the group on Trikafta. And what that means clinically over time remains to be seen. But it is good to have a treatment choice, and particularly for those on Trikafta who have been struggling with really significant side effects. The third thing that happened on December 20th was that the FDA did issue a black box warning for liver injury for both of these medications. And this was an act, a very cautionary act. And what that means is a black box warning is literally a warning that's put in a black box at the top of the prescribing information for the providers who read about it when they go to prescribe the medication. And it's really meant to flag the potential of an adverse event happening so that people will be sure to talk to patients and families about that risk. So what that means is that more frequent blood work monitoring for liver blood tests is recommended when starting either of these medications now. So every month for the first 6 months at least, and then quarterly thereafter. And certainly by doing this blood work, any problems that arise can be detected and dealt with quickly. So we talked about aging adult, the expanding and aging population, and this has been made possible by transformative therapies like the modulators and our care model, but that leaves us in what KC mentioned this morning, in uncharted territory. What effect does CF have on aging, and what effect does aging have on CF? And so we know there are some CF-related issues that increase with age, like diabetes and bone disease. And on the flip side, we know that there are issues of general aging that happen over time and will happen to all of us most likely, which high blood pressure, high cholesterol, et cetera. And what we need to understand is the interface of these two in adults with cystic fibrosis. And so what we're doing is we're collecting registry data and we're sponsoring studies in each of these different areas to fully understand how care may need to be adapted moving into the future. And one thing that's not on this slide that is definitely worth mentioning is what about the stress of managing a chronic, complex medical disease over the course of a lifetime, and what the impact of that on mental health. And so I think there are clearly challenges with aging. Aging is an amazing problem for us to have, but clearly challenges with aging that we are laser focused on to make sure that we can move into the future and provide optimal care. And where does this optimal care come from? This leads into the heart of CF care, which is the person with CF in the middle, really heavily supported by their core CF team. And this is an updated figure. You guys have probably seen other figures that look at the care model and the care team. But this is called the circle of care, and it really helps us understand that there's an expanding circle of healthcare professionals that may be involved in the care of people with CF over the course of a lifetime. And this could be someone like a primary care physician or various different specialists depending on individual patient needs. But what we believe is that the CF care team remains the main team for people with CF, but really needs to look to make sure that these other healthcare professionals that are increasingly more involved in care have the knowledge about CF that they need to adequately take care of people with CF, that communication channels are optimal for optimal coordination of care, and that again, that everything continues to work like a team, but a more expanded team. So these are some of the things we're thinking about with care moving into the future. And speaking of teamwork, I'll invite my colleague and friend, Dr. J.P. Clancy, to take it from here and talk a little bit more about clinical research. Thank you.
Lovely.
All right. Thanks.
Yep. Whoa. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be back in Texas. I was here last month. I had the opportunity to come to Austin, and there were 15 CF care centers from the state of Texas represented. My biggest mistake, I didn't bring my boots, so I did bring them this time. Steve, I've learned I have to wear my boots. They're size 13. There is nothing I can put them in. So anyway, I wanted to say again, thank you so much for being here, all the work that you do. And I'm going to give you some updates on some of the clinical research that's happening that's not happening in industry. In other words, these are some of the research projects that are trying to address the questions that are important to CF but are never going to be answered in a drug trial. And there's a lot I could say. I'm going to limit it to about 5 or 6, but I guess I'll take the takeaway is I feel like we're really entering a new phase when we're starting to ask and address the questions of a completely new group of people with CF. So more to come in just a second after that teaser. So the first thing I wanted to mention, and it was brought up by Whitney, is that some people have experienced adverse events, side effects, symptoms when they have been on Trikafta and other modulators too. It's not a lot. I mean, let's be blunt. These are relatively small numbers, thankfully, but they're real. For those people who are having those symptoms, it's getting in the way of them taking their medicines. So we have designed a study. Its name is at the bottom. It's called Retrial. And Retrial is a study which is really going to look very carefully at how people do once they start Alyftrek. And these people are either those who have stopped or reduced the dose of Trikafta because of mental health side effects or because of liver function problems, two of the major reasons that people don't take a modulator if they're eligible. So it's really narrowing down on those two. And again, this is going to be very intensive monitoring, but you got these two groups here as sort of shown in the picture here. And then over time, one group will have a lot of testing and looking at how their brain function is, their mood is, et cetera, through a variety of different measurements. And the other one will be looking more closely at their liver functions. And so we really hope this is going to help us better understand the nature of those symptoms so that we know how to manage them better for the future. So more to come, kicking off literally this month, and won't ever be done by a drug company, to be honest with you. This type of study is not going to happen without the CF Foundation. Next study I'm going to highlight has been plugging along for about 5 years now. Trikafta was approved in 2019, and that drug showed tremendous benefits, lung function, risk of exacerbations, growth, things like that. However, it really was not a very holistic look at how people do on a medication like Trikafta. What about other lung measurements? What about GI and liver measurements? What about a variety of quality of life measurements? What about endocrine factors? And so this study has really brought together expertise from all these different disciplines to build a study looking at the holistic effects of Trikafta. And I can't give them to you all, but I wanted to give you a little bit about the lungs, which I thought was really interesting. And that's kind of highlighted in the yellow there. We know that people with CF often have chronic infections, more common in adults. And what this study did was look at people who have chronic Pseudomonas infection. And what they found is that on average, the amount of Pseudomonas that was detectable for people once they started Trikafta dropped 100-fold, which is amazing. However, it wasn't that simple. It wasn't an average. You actually, if you look a little more carefully, there were some people who had like a little dip and some people who completely cleared. It was gone. And so it really asks a brand new question. Why do people respond so differently to Trikafta? Why can some people clear and why can some people don't? And the reason that I bring that up is we wouldn't have known that unless we went back and asked this question. And it's going to really set up research to really try to get rid of infections knowing this new information. So more to come. Keep your eyes peeled. And all right. Another topic that is becoming of great interest is being parents with CF and having women who have CF having babies. I think we may have heard through other venues that the birth rate, the number of pregnancies in women with CF has tripled with the advent of highly effective modulators. However, we don't have any data to tell us how that goes. Is it safe, effective? Does it have any concerning side effects or events that occur that have never been really captured? And so a study was designed by experts within the CF research community. One of the leaders of this study, wherever you may be, Jen Taylor-Kauser, is sitting over here. There she is. Thank you, Jen, providing the leadership for this. This study is really trying to provide that information about the effects of taking modulators in people who have CF and take modulators. And this study begins with visits before the birth. Here comes the baby, and then it follows afterwards. And the point is, it's looking at pregnancy, perinatal, and after. And it's not just mom, it's actually looking at the outcome of the child, and it's looking at those over the next 2 years. A lot of important aspects of pregnancy-related care are being monitored. And I got some updated numbers, and please feel free to shout out new numbers. Over 312 moms have been enrolled, 280 live births, 270 across 270 moms, so there's still a few cooking, if that makes sense. Vast majority have taken modulators throughout pregnancy. And the point of that is we finally are going to have some data so we can inform and know how to have these conversations with people who want to have families with CF. And last thing I would just want to mention is this whole idea gave birth, no pun intended, to something called the Protect Workshop. And that is the idea that people who are pregnant with a baby who has CF, whether the mom does or doesn't have CF, can we treat that baby via treating the mom? And I think that's like, well, got to get my head wrapped around that. But basically, using modulators during pregnancy to treat in utero CF. And so this started with a workshop, just sharing what experiences people have, and it's going to be leading to a study that's going to come. So again, another study that will never happen in the industry space. Another topic that I think you brought up, Whitney, thank you. We tied together so well, we didn't even try, but was aging in CF, and specifically colon cancer. We know that people with CF are at a much higher risk of colon cancer, and certainly as the population of people with CF gets older, that risk comes higher. And certainly you add something like a lung transplant, and that just adds it, takes it up another level. And for anybody, how many people here have actually had to have a colonoscopy? You know, just for fun. Yes, all right, I kind of thought so, all right. And how many of you enjoyed the prep? All right, that's what I was thinking. Point is, people with CF, if you take that prep, you take it times 2. It's twice as bad, okay? They gotta do it for 2 days. So the point is, can we do anything to sort of better line up that whole prep and not bronchoscopy, colonoscopy with who needs it? And so the concept here is really, can we use some of these new emerging stool tests to guide the when of when that colonoscopy is needed? And what you're looking at here is just enrollment over time. And the blue was the expected enrollment, and the red is the actual. And the point is, it was a super fast enrolling study. It's all done. We're now just in the analysis phase. But again, another situation where you're never going to find a drug company to do this kind of study. And it is really critical information for people with CF. All right, coming around the bend. CF-related diabetes. It was one of our highlighted topics last year at the North American CF Conference. About literally up to 50% of adults getting into sort of 30s and beyond have CF-related diabetes. And those numbers are, we believe, are actually just going to go up as people live longer with CF. So we acknowledge CF-related diabetes is a huge and growing challenge. And it is certainly well known that the addition of diabetes management on top of an already complicated regimen can really be that straw that breaks the camel's back. So how can we potentially remove some of that burden? And one idea is shown here, and this is something called the bionic pancreas. And I'm thinking of, you know, Steve Majors. Anybody? $6 million? Oh, I got a few out there. Yes, all right, I'm not alone on that one. But the idea here is what you basically, this concept is, you take a glucose, continuous glucose monitor, seen them on sometimes people on their arms or wherever, and it talks to an insulin pump that's attached so that the sugar level tells how much insulin is needed and vice versa. So it's a closed loop between those two devices. And just to show you the effect of that, this is looking at glucose levels of people with CF treated with usual care. So just either like glucose monitoring shots, but not really the two talking to each other. And the straight line is basically the average, and the dotted line's the range. The point is, you know, okay, that gives you a starting point. Look what happens when you switch the same people over to this bionic pancreas. All of a sudden you drop the glucose and you narrow the range, and they're actually staying where their blood sugar should be. So this study is off and running, 25 people enrolled, and we hope that by September that study will be, the enrollment will be completed. And the other thing that's important here is we're trying to push this forward to lead to FDA label expansion. So this is really exciting for those in the CF who have CF-related diabetes and think is a paradigm for future therapies. Last thing I'm going to talk about is a study specifically for those who are not taking CFTR modulators. We haven't really talked about them as much today, not to say that they haven't been front of mind, there's just a lot of other things, but just a reminder, 10% of people with CF on average are not able to benefit from modulators, either because of genetics or because of side effects. And this population has a great deal of need. Their outcomes are significantly worse compared to those who are benefiting from modulators. And these people really need a CFTR-based therapy. It's complicated trying to develop a CFTR-based therapy like Steve was describing in a really small population of people with CF. So this study is trying to develop sort of the landscape to make that happen. And specifically, it's a study that's looking to enroll about 400 people with CF and generate the data that can be used across different research programs. So it'll prospective data. We have a new website. Go ahead and use the QR code. Visit if you would like. And finally, being able to use that data across programs so that it's so much more efficient. So not every program needs its own control group. You can have a common shared control group, which is going to mean a lot less people needed in the study and a lot more comparability across the studies. So very excited about this. This is almost up to 30 enrolled and is really picking up steam. Happy to answer any questions about that. So I just wanted to highlight there's a lot going on in addition to new industry therapies, based therapies. A lot of these studies are not so lung-centric. That's the reality of CF now. Yes, infections, yes, lung symptoms persist, but that's not the whole story, and we're really trying to address those. We're really starting to take on topics that are, we believe, meaningful to an aging population and certainly consistent with some of our recent strategic planning. I would say that we got work to do to really get a better handle on GI symptoms. That's something we've heard loud and clear and more to come. And then finally, that REACH initiative, it's a biggie, but it's really the next step in paving the way to curative therapies. So thank you. I think that's it. Do I do that?
Perfect.
All right, we got it. All right, thank you.
Well, thank you, each of you. It's confidence inspiring to have your leadership there. So we have lots of questions already, but make sure if you have questions that you want to be answered, please follow the instructions on the screen. One thing I'm going to say is there's a decent number here that are about NIH funding and advocacy, and we have a whole session coming up on that later. So I'm going to say hold on to those questions. We're going to send those to Mary Dwight and her team because that's what they're leading the charge on that. So we're going to focus a little bit more on the pure science and then trust that we're going to be able to do this. JP, I'm going to start with one for you, and actually it's my question. It's not on the list.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
But I saw you put begin.
Yeah.
Up there.
Yep.
And we've talked a lot about aging in the CF, but talk to us about begin and why that's so important and why, anyway, fill us in.
Well, yeah, thank you. And PROMISE, as I mentioned, was that study that really looks at people over the age 6 and older and looking at the sort of holistic impact of Trikafta. Begin is for people under the age of 6 who begin Trikafta and potentially Alyftrek. And really the idea there is, can we treat people early enough with CFTR modulators to prevent a number of the different potential manifestations of CF? Can we rescue pancreatic function? Can we delay or reduce the onset of abnormal glucose tolerance, which leads, is kind of the forebearer for CF-related diabetes? Can we prevent infection with CF pathogens? That study BEGIN is ongoing. It's enrolled over 300 people. And we've actually decided to expand that study because it really is that opportunity to catch and understand how we can really change the trajectory of CF, starting with modulators in early childhood. Yeah. So really exciting work.
This is, I think, the future, right? Yeah. I mean, we're going to be focused on adults with CF maintaining, but we'd love to be able to prevent CF by starting early. It's amazing what you can do when you start, particularly below the age of 2, rescuing the pancreas, and so we're excited and we want to make sure that we really understand that part because that's where we're going. Each of these drugs keeps getting moved down. Ivacaftor or Kalydeco is now approved, I think, down to 1 month of age, right? And so they're going to continue to do these other drugs. We want to understand the benefits of when you start really early. CF's not going to look the same. It's not going to look the same. So excited. Thank you for your leadership on that. Whitney, this is actually a good one, which is talk to us about what we're doing to try to help with lung transplant outcomes. This is, I know something you're both involved with clinically, but also on the oversight side. So can you talk a little bit about lung transplant and what's going on there?
Good. I'm glad you asked. I mean, we've heard data that since Trikafta was approved, the number of lung transplants each year has gone down, which is great. However, we know that there are 1,700 individuals living after a lung transplant right now with CF in this country. So our commitment remains steadfast. And the complication that's most troublesome after lung transplant is chronic rejection. And so we have really been focused on trying to learn more about chronic rejection through a group of 15 different sites we have around the country that have strong CF expertise as well as lung transplants, and they're called the CF Lung Transplant Consortium, sort of a mini TDN, Therapeutic Development Network concept, where we are enrolling people from the time of transplant or even people who had been transplanted many years before, and collecting blood samples, bronchoscopy samples, and data to understand what happens over time and how chronic rejection, what are the early signs and leading to potential treatments. And then that consortium is very well poised for industry or other drug companies to come in, just like the TDN, and try new therapies as we learn more. So we are 15 sites strong and still going.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I've also been impressed by not even just the research part, but lung transplant care is so complicated, and sometimes it's hard to coordinate it with the CF Center. And I know a big part of the work has just been getting those two teams on the same page, right? So they really are coordinating the care. There's been some success there.
Yes, and Erin Tallarico is here in the room, and she spent a lot of her time and efforts on this, and we've supported lots of quality improvement programs to streamline that transition of care between, and co-management after transplant between CF and lung transplant. And I think it's actually going to serve us really well as we're looking at aging and working with, remember, that expanded group of healthcare professionals. How do we connect, build relationships with other healthcare professionals, have good communication, and coordinate care, whether it's with CF and lung transplant or with CF and a number of different specialties that we may work with. So I think actually that work has been critically important.
Yeah, we want to avoid lung transplant as much as possible, but when we do have to do it, we want to be well prepared.
Do it well.
Yeah. So Steve, I have two for you, actually. The first one is more about RNA, and that is, you talked about the RNA trials and how those are moving ahead, but when do we sort of expect to start seeing some of those results, or where we'll get it? We'll start to understand what's happening in that space.
Yeah, well, one of the favorite parts of my job is starting to see these sorts of results really come off out of the clinic and start to devise what we need to do next as they come in to bring these over the finish line. And that is starting to happen because people with CF are being treated really one at a time or two at a time. And so even though we haven't been able to see conglomerate results or share them with the community yet, on the individual level, we're starting to see them and trying to adjust our approach to that. I think as a group-wise basis, we're looking towards the end of the year where that kind of thing will be public in the various cohorts where it's happened. And then we'll really roll up our sleeves to think about what we need to do next.
Perfect. The other one here, I want to actually read it specifically. Will the science related to lung repair and regeneration for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, IPF, a different lung disease, potentially apply to CF lungs as well?
It's a great question. Lung regeneration is one of those new frontiers of biology that is capturing a ton of interest. And the NIH has had a lot of interest in addressing the problem for people with IPF for about 5 or 7 years. In fact, I remember crystal clear when the director of the Institute for Lung Research, Gary Gibbons, said, we have got to make a difference in IPF. The fact that we still call it idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, meaning we don't know what it even causes it, is a disgrace. And we need to bring more resources. Actually, in my prior life as an academic investigator, we jumped in the mix. They actually said, we want lessons from other diseases to be brought to bear on the IPF problem, and I joined that group and got to know people. And some of the work that's being done there has generated a scientific exchange with this sort of funding apparatus. And some of the work that's being done there, including by people we've now brought into the CF problem, like the lung regeneration group at Boston University, run by Daryl Cotton and his protege, Finn Hawkins, who are both funded by the CF Foundation now in Pioneer Awards to try and break down new frontiers in CF lung disease, are using cell reprogramming to try and devise a cell sort of therapy that could be used to help repair or circumvent gene therapy. What does that mean? This means you can take cells from people, program them down to what we call iPS cells, cells that can become any organ. Take some cells from somebody from CF, fix them in the lab, much like the story I told you about sickle cell disease, where you can be fixed in the lab with gene editing, then make tons of them, and then apply them to people again. So this is still at the Star Trek moment because there's a lot of biology being done. You can also program these sorts of cells to generate proteins that cause repair, and the hope is that repair might be able to happen in a disease like IPF, and then of course that might open the floodgates for other lung diseases, including CF, for example. So there's a lot of learning. It's not ready for prime time, but we have contacts either directly like I experienced or indirectly through our funding mechanisms, and or finally forcing them into collaborations where we're looking specifically to try and fix the CF problem.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons why we're particularly, at least watching this closely, is it's that question, okay, if we cure cystic fibrosis with gene editing, do you fix the lungs that are already damaged? And the answer is no, you wouldn't, right? If you already had a lot of scarring on your lungs, you would fix the cystic fibrosis gene, you would not have that continued progression from CF. But this is technology which in theory could actually help regenerate or actually to do some of that repair. Like you said, it's a bit Star Trek-y, it's a long way away, but that's the reason why we say this would be something to if we could actually help with that some, because again of the ability to actually make lung function better, not just protect it.
Even though it's Star Trek, I will say, like last week, we're doing experiments where we're taking cells that we procured, sent to the group at Boston, they fixed it, sent it back, putting it into the models to see what happens. So we're working.
JP, got one for you, which is, it says it's about infection, and specifically the idea of using breath to diagnose infection. Why is this new technique being researched? What does the potential of this innovation, what might it mean to patient care?
Great question. And I think they'll
start from the basics.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that I think there's going to be probably some additional discussion during the hot topics tomorrow that's around infection. So two of the folks who are doing a lot of this work, Tiffany Burnett and Dave Nichols, will be happy to give you a little bit more. So why would breath make sense as a place to look for a CF infection? Well, turns out that bacteria release, I'm going to call them evil humors, call them what you will, but things in your breath that can be detected by specialized sensors. And this has been used, conceptually, this has been used a long time, actually, in the meat industry, actually smelling the meat, per se, to make sure that during its processing or whatnot, can you pick up evidence that it might be infected or going bad or something like that. So there's already kind of use of this concept that this is a pretty sensitive way to pick up bacterial infections. And so the idea here is to adapt conceptually, being able to sort of take a breath sample that's provided from a person with CF and see if you can determine whether that captures or is able to reflect any infection they have. Why is that a big deal now? Well, because a good news about a drug like Trikafta is that people are doing much better and they are coughing less and bringing up a lot less mucus and sputum. The bad news is it's really hard to tell when people have infections anymore and when to intervene for infections because they don't have that specimen that we've relied on in the same way. So this would be really our next generation of managing and monitoring and managing CF infections. rather than relying on going down there with something like a bronchoscope, which is pretty invasive, and trying to get a specimen that way. Perhaps it could be as simple as breathe into a tube, seal it, send it to the lab, wait a few hours, get your readout, and know what type of infection you have. So anyway, it's actually happening right now, and the CF Foundation recently announced, and Steve, you worked a lot on this effort, but a collaboration with a company called Owlstone that's really going to try to adapt this specifically to CF, and feel free to weigh in.
Yeah, I'd love to tack on and say, well, because first, thanks for that really nice answer. And then just to say that this is one of the areas that I'm really, really proud about, and that we have been able to do in the last 3 years that we might not have otherwise been able to do. And this is because, number one, we already had basic research from people that were working on this problem that we didn't really know how it would turn out. We didn't fund them because we definitely knew that this was going to turn into a product. We funded them to say, is this possible? And they started to show it was possible in the way that JP has already described. And then second, we heard from you, the community, that said, we're going to need a device because we don't cough up in a sputum anymore. But we also knew the results that you shared, which is some people eradicate with modulators, some people don't. And we want to finish the job. If we're going to take like that biofilm therapy I talked about earlier and cure infection permanently, we're going to have to be able to sensitively detect this at the point of care. Breathe in the device. Yes, no, do you have it? And so we had a team then go out and survey all these companies that were working in this area, refine it down to one or two, and then ultimately we picked one and are backing them to get to that magic device. Blow here, yes, no. Do you have Pseudomonas? Do you need the antibiotic? And we don't know if it'll work, but we're pretty excited about being able to intervene in this way and try to make a difference.
Yeah, I'll tack on the clinical side, because I think the tail end of the question was, what does that mean for CF care down the line? And so we know that the care model that's been so successful, and we're seeing the results with an aging population, it's been very demanding. Even when people are well with CF, we've asked them to come in every 3 months and get PFTs and a culture. And it used to be sputum culture, as JP was saying. Now, with some people not able to produce sputum, even among adults, we're doing throat swabs, which also look for bacteria, but aren't as sensitive as finding it in sputum. So if it's there, it's helpful, but if it's not there, we're not entirely sure. But these throat swabs, it is important to figure out what bacteria are there, and specifically Pseudomonas for those who haven't grown it before, because we know acquiring and Pseudomonas and having it over time can lead to loss of lung function over time. So that's so now when people say, why do I have to come to clinic every 3 months? I'm doing well. Let's space it out. Well, you can have a home spirometer, right? They can. This is a negotiation that actually happens. I had someone in clinic on Wednesday of this week tell me that he thought coming once a year for his Trikafta prescription was unreasonable. literally. So that's the extreme. But there's people in the middle that they're busy, they have lives, and they may have to travel. And so, if we think about the way care could be innovated from home, is some of the visits may be supplemented with telehealth, and if people have a home spirometer, then we can get that piece of data. But the missing piece of data is, how do you do the culture from home? And we're actually supporting some studies looking at people swabbing themselves or swabbing their kids and mailing it in to the care center. So that might be one way. But this breath test would be amazing to complement that. So again, trying to tailor care to people's needs without compromising outcomes.
So I think we really answered that one. That was good. Yeah, exactly.
That got 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody else want to add in? Are we good? We're good? Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah, that was perfect. It's great. JP, clarification when it said, in regard to this study, the Retrial, change or transition from Trikafta to Alyftrek.
Yeah.
Can you clarify, are these findings in this study currently in process, or is it a complete and can be shared?
The
retrial.
The retrial.
Where are we in the study?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're just in the kicking off phase. So getting started, meaning Alyftrek was approved in December 20th, yes. We were on the phone. I was in New Orleans. I remember. So, anyway, but Alyftrek was approved then, and it has been rolling out sort of different rates, different places, I'll put it that way. The study has been approved for conduct through the TDN, and it's kind of an interesting collaboration, too, of some of our research expertise that exists in different networks within the broader CF landscape. And really, it brought together expertise in mental health and the types of research designs necessary to understand mental health. And we brought together, expertise in liver monitoring, clearly two things that don't necessarily come together, obviously, but were brought together into this. So the study is approved. It's getting started at sites, and it's going to be about 25 sites. It's not a huge study, to be honest with you. 200 people, it's a good-sized study, but probably doesn't need to be completely nationwide for the purposes of the study. It's probably not going to answer the question, did this drug cause my side effects? I mean, I think, unfortunately, that's a really hard answer. It seems like an easy answer, but it's really hard. More importantly, though, in my mind, is, people are experiencing these. Let's characterize what they are in a little more granular way, so we can really address them a little more effectively. Right now, we kind of tend to hear kind of vague descriptions of, some fogginess, not really feeling well, or maybe some anxiety. I don't want to undermine those, but the point is, having a little better definition of what we're dealing with, I think will really help us better understand how to manage that and really not let it get in the way of benefit.
Yeah. I think specifically to be able to answer that question, we get asked, hey, I'm having some issues with Trikafta. If I switch to Alyftrek, will they get better? How often do they get better? Is it most of the time?
Some
never?
of the time.
Or that's the real,
Yeah.
we're going to get this.
Yep.
There's a question here. I rarely say I don't know the answer to this, but I don't know the answer to the first part of this. So I'm going to ask for your guys' help on this. It said, do we have statistics on how many people are diagnosed with CF in utero? And what causes medical teams, the second part we can talk about, what causes medical teams to test in utero? But I don't know, Whitney, do you have anything on that? I'll put you on the spot. You're the closest on the clinician.
I'm looking for Jen, actually.
Actually, oh yeah, we got Jen. Oh, good. Yeah, Jen. So Dr. Taylor
I think the numbers have been, there's a lot of, there's several case series and a lot of potential excitement around diagnosing and treating CF in utero. I think that the sheer numbers are probably unknown.
What is it? Yeah.
But like less than 50 a year kind of thing? Yeah.
So the answer is, and I'm wondering if this is an Ellie question, where Ellie's here. This is perfect, thank you, if it is. Do you want to add something?
I think, I don't know the numbers, but I can tell stories about how it happens. Like, one is that some, pregnant moms get offered genetic testing by their doctors often. And of course, if they were a CF carrier and didn't know it, then their baby has a chance of having CF if the father is also a carrier. So what might happen is that if you want to go further, then you would test the father. And if they were both carriers and you already had a baby there, then you could do sampling of the placenta or the baby cells to try and answer the question, do they have CF? That's one way. That's pretty rare that sort of thing happens.
Although the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology actually recommends for most people to get,
all women should be screened now
yeah, the
before
go ahead and
pregnancy.
get a screen,
The
which
screening
can sometimes
but it's
trigger
not
that.
happening.
A lot of people don't do the testing, but yeah.
The other way that it can happen is, of course, all babies are, if they're getting normal health care, is getting ultrasounded in their mother, and sometimes changes happen that can be seen in the fetus that may go, ooh, this looks suspicious for a problem, and it looks suspicious for a problem that we think is associated with CF, and that's usually the GI problem. Meconium ileus, that's what if you couldn't hear Dr. Taylor-Kauser was saying, is that so about 10 to 50% of people with CF are born with meconium ileus because of the problem with the GI obstruction. And some of those people, some of those babies, unborn babies, are picked up with the ultrasound of the mother. And so if that was seen, and that's the example that in fact, where CFTR modulators were used successfully to reverse it before the baby was born, then one could imagine trying to do that with other fetuses and unborn babies.
Yeah. So an area we're continuing to learn on. We're grateful for Dr. Taylor-Kauser's leadership on this.
I
Steve, I'm going to ask you one that I know we've talked about because you and I looked at the data.
I think Dr. Farrow wanted to add.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Al, I'm
It's
sorry.
really
Oh, great.
hard to
Oh,
see
good,
the
good.
I
yeah.
know, we're
Who is that?
blinded.
Dr. Farrow, perfect. Yes, our Chief Medical Officer, please.
Mike, come up and use a mic, or use a mic. We
I
need a
saw
mic.
him on the way in here. Want mine?
I can yell. Does that help?
Yeah.
Sure.
We've not intentionally looked at this, but it is interesting that we do capture this occasionally in the registry, and our team has struggled to wrestle because we ask for date of diagnosis and then date of birth, and the team has always wondered, what do we do when the date of diagnosis is before the date of birth? So it is a question we could potentially go back and
Oh, interesting. There you go. All right, well, thank you for that question. Obviously, we get some more work to do. It's really cutting edge, and you've heard those stories with the meconium. I guess the other part is the meconium ileus, as you were saying, and just the impacts of those. So, Steve, I'm going to ask you, and I know you and I looked at the data not that long ago, which is basically the effect of Trikafta on the sinuses. What do we know about
It's
that?
been remarkably effective for most people with sinus disease. Almost all people with CF have a pretty strong element of sinus disease where the air is exposed to first, and so the CF problem happens there first, even often before lung disease. So, but the cells that make CFTR and deal with mucus and deal with the deal with infection all work very, very similar to the lung. So the same sort of benefits we know very, very well that can happen with CFTR modulator therapy in the lung is happening in the sinuses. And so people can flush out their sinuses better. They get rid of a lot of that mucus and infection. And what we found from our colleagues that do ENT or otolaryngology, basically sinus doctors, it's a remarkable change for most people with CF. Now, there are examples where, for whatever reason, maybe they're allergic prone, or maybe they're in an environment where they're making more mucus because of the things that they're inhaling or exposed to, that people can still have problems from their sinuses. So it's not completely gone, but it is dramatically improved.
One thing I kind of wanted to add, and Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Taylor Gauser has done a lot of this work in collaboration with some ENT experts, but I don't think, I think there's concerns that olfaction remains problematic. In other words, your sense of smell does not completely recover, at least as best I understand, which is...
Especially
Which is critical.
chronic inflammation.
Yeah.
So in adults, it doesn't get better, but we're submitting an abstract to NACFC showing that in kids, it does actually.
Yeah.
Olfaction.
Olfaction,
the smell for those.
Yeah, it's
Not,
probably...
they don't how you smell, it's how well you smell. No, that's not work either. Smell capacity, no, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification,
Sense of smell.
JP.
Sense of smell.
Thank
Sense
you.
of smell.
Bingo.
Let's go.
You know.
Sense of smell, which is very
Yeah.
connected to sense of taste, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is one I think maybe everyone's going to want to pile in on, but it talks about, it says, my husband with CF who takes Trikafta still struggles with GI issues. What's going on in this area? How confident are we that we're going to be able to combat some of these issues in the near future? So I don't know, anybody want to, JP, you want to start, and then we'll go? And I think this is one we can all talk a little bit about.
Yeah, so give you guys a minute. No, one of the things I think I highlighted at the end of my presentation is that GI symptoms continue and have not been magically fixed by CFTR modulators, and obviously persist in those who are not on modulators. We have done some recent survey work to really sort of better understand that, and starting to, and again, part of our long-term strategic planning, identified GI as really a persistent symptom. In fact, it kind of rose to number 2 on the priority list, right behind sort of curative therapies, genetic-based therapies, while in the past, infection had been higher and some pulmonary things. We think that, thankfully, that represents improvements in the pulmonary, but point is the GI is sort of bubbled up, is certainly really there. I think we've struggled a little bit about what aspect of GI. GI is a big bucket, and so some of that follow-up survey work was really to better understand what aspects of GI. Is it more constipation? Is it diarrhea? Is it gas? Is it bloating? Is it is it reflux? And these are all, many of these are symptoms, and so trying to tie those back to the cause is going to take some work, to be honest with you. So point is, right now, we're sort of getting a better handle on the nature of those. There have been a couple of, and Steve, you're welcome to speak to this too, but a couple of special research, they're called RFAs, requests for applications, to do some basic science work about better understanding the GI work. I think the last thing I just was going to say is that it may represent, at least in part, sort of the impact of CF over time on the GI tract. Things seem okay right out of the gate for most kids with CF, but I think it's probably safe to say that some of these symptoms continue to stack over the years. And so are there aspects that we can sort of go backwards with and really potentially reverse? So I hope that's a starting point and gave you guys a moment to think of some additional add-ons.
Yeah.
So.
We answered really nicely. I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's probably a lot of different things, and we've got to sort out which ones are really driving it. That's one. Second is we got to sort out if it's, just like you just said, is it a problem that if CFTR was present more of the time earlier, would it kind of go away? Just like your sense of smell might get better if you treat early. Just like we're learning with the pancreas, that if you treat early, real early, months old, year old, you can start to preserve some pancreas function. And maybe that's the problem that we're after in the GI tract. Or do we just need to get CFTR function even higher to fully restore health to the GI tract? Yeah. We're working on both those problems. We're also dedicating some time and some energy and some resources to try and solve which one of those is it, so that we can then think how best to intervene, because right now we don't fully understand it yet.
Got some work to do. Actually, the related one, maybe I'll give to Whitney, which says, will digestive enzymes always be necessary? Are there long-term effects from taking them? And has Trikafta been able to reverse any of the pancreatic insufficiency?
I think that dovetails nicely with the last question and highlights that there are many unanswered questions at this time. We do collect data in the registry about dosing of enzymes, and I know in our clinic we've seen that the requirement or people with CF have been able to take maybe adults less enzymes, or modify the way they're taking enzymes a little bit on Trikafta. Some have completely stopped taking enzymes, but it's really a mixed bag, at least for adults. So I think there remain a lot of unanswered questions. Again, that idea of starting treatment as early as possible to preserve the digestive function. But I think one thing I did want to mention is, with all of these GI issues, obviously that they remain, and we talked about colorectal cancer risk going up with aging, and so from our workforce standpoint, we're really thinking a lot about ensuring that there are knowledgeable GI docs that for CF, both on the adult side and the pediatric side around the country, and that has been a real struggle for people to find knowledgeable GI docs on CF in their area. And so we continue to support a program called Digest, which is developing integrations in GI care. I forget the acronym, but it's essentially a 3-year career development program to bring gastroenterologists into the CF field to gain clinical expertise, experience, and then also to develop a research interest. And I was actually on a webinar with we have a current 3-year group that's going to be ending this summer, and they are breaking up. Many of them are excited to continue their work in CF, and they're breaking up into smaller groups like pancreas, like foregut or esophagus, stomach, and then liver, to really develop these cells of expertise around the country that can push our knowledge in these areas forward. And a lot of them have also been doing virtual grand rounds, so they're giving talks, which is amazing. And we had one at Inova. They're offering to give virtual talks to CF care centers around the country, inviting the local GI docs and really trying to educate us all on how to better address some of these GI symptoms. So we're advertising another round of that 3-year career development award this summer, so our commitment continues.
So part of this is we always think about developing drugs. Like the answer is to develop a drug. We're not going to be developing a drug for many of these things, but we are going to be thinking about how can we think about the management part, right? And so we'll continue to work on this. So we're down to 8 minutes left. So we're going to do a couple things. Let's go blitz round. And also I want you to each think about one thing that you're particularly excited about at the end. We'll try. But Steve, I'm going to ask you one which I think is a very interesting one, which was, are people who are currently on Trikafta eligible for, or might they benefit from genetic therapies?
Yeah, so right now, genetic therapies are being developed for people who are not on highly active CFTR modulator therapies. Why is that the case? Well, number one, should kind of obvious, right? Those people are in the most need. Number two is, as a developer, it's a lot easier to go from no CFTR function to some CFTR function by the genetic therapy versus some CFTR function on people on modulators, a little bit more. And they need to be successful first, and it's a lot easier to be successful if you're doing the easier thing, and it's a lot easier to be successful if you're starting from one group of people versus a lot of group of people. So that's what we're gonna see first. But conceptually, there's no reason why those that a genetic therapy that work wouldn't also work for people who are on modulators. And if they're good enough, one could start to imagine replacing or going along with modulator therapy, and that will be the frontiers that we push once we get on the board, if you will, have one that start to work and then expand from there.
Yeah, and certainly the things we'll learn eventually we think about that group and then it'll expand out as we really get that established, as you said. JP, one quick one, but I have to ask you since your name is JP Clancy, and that is, are we working with anybody from Ireland that has a higher number of people with CF to collaborate on CF work?
Well, you'll be happy to know there, Michael Boyle. Which we have our connections, you know. Sorry, that was about one of the worst Irish accents I could possibly pull off. But we are actually supporting research that is going on in Ireland, both in the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And specifically, mentioned one of the Northern Ireland studies that's going on with the UK is something called Recover. Recover is a little bit like Promise, in which it's looking at holistically sort of different different ways of measuring how people are responding to Trikafta. And what I'm excited about that study, it included CT scans of the lungs to look for sort of scarring, and also some other more sensitive lung function measurements. And really, it's turned out that I think that work is really going to be able to help us translate how those ways of showing CFTR is working better might actually be really beneficial for our development of new genetic-based therapies. So it's a little tangential. And another one that we've been supporting that comes to mind off the top of my head is it's a different approach in which looking really, really, really carefully at people who start a drug like Trikafta and doing a sort of specialized testing that's only can be done in a small group of people. We call these the Dublin studies because it's being done out of Dublin, and really, you know, how rapidly a modulator comes on. You can measure its benefit within 24 hours, you know, by looking at sweat tests and lung function tests and the way the sputum looks and so forth. So really helping sort of better understand how modulators turn on. So long way of saying we got our
They've been great partners. That's exactly right. Yeah. Whitney, we're going to go quick on a couple of these, but one of the things, just talk a little bit about discussions about weight gain in clinic now. This is a new topic. How is that going? Is there a risk of actually introducing concern about sort of the opposite, eating disorders, or any thoughts on those discussions in clinic?
Yes, so our dietitians now have some new challenges. It's not all a struggle to gain weight now. Many people on Trikafta have gained weight successfully, but some people have gained more weight than they intended. And some of that is maybe a byproduct of a diet that we pushed for a long time. We call it kind of the legacy CF diet, where we just wanted to pack in calories. Any way we could, eat what you want, get the calories in to try, because we know that having a healthy weight is linked with healthy lung function. So we were always very focused on pushing up weight, pushing up lung function. And now with Trikafta, individuals are healthier. The GI tract is absorbing more nutrients. There's less caloric drain on the body from all of the infections and coughing. And some people have been able to gain weight to a healthy level, and some people who continue to eat and even make dietary changes still have gained more weight than anticipated. And so now we're seeing actually people I have 3 patients now that are on weight loss medications. In fact, GLP-1 agonists, you guys have probably heard of them, where they're now looking at, obviously not going to come off of Trikafta because of all the benefits, but they're looking at a new, obesity or being overweight comes with its own set of health issues, and so we're trying to balance those, and our CF dietitians are gaining knowledge on both extremes of weight, underweight and overweight, and trying to help people get to the middle. And I think, unfortunately, there have been some body dysmorphic issues that have come out of it. Patients who actually had a young adult, a woman patient of mine who said, being skinny used to be the only thing I had going for me. And now I don't have that. She's like, I should be grateful. I feel terrible saying it, but like I don't identify with this body. And so people are adjusting. And we're trying, when we're seeing people in clinic, we're trying to not just look for anxiety and depression, but these subtle nuances. And there's studies being done by our STRC looking at eating patterns and body image issues after Trikafta.
Yeah, great. I'm going to take 2 quick categories just so we punch them out and think about what you're excited about. There's a good number of questions about liver disease. One of these is about what are we doing for people who have cirrhosis or portal hypertension. And the truth is, we want to partner with some of our liver colleagues on this, because for people who already have cirrhosis or some of the the portal hypertension that comes with that, that's not really cystic fibrosis as much. It's sort of its own thing, and there's whole people who do research on that. So we're actually not focusing quite as much on that. What we are trying to do is to understand what causes CF liver disease more, and that's changing. We used to think that this was due to poor bile flow through the liver, sort of an obstructive thing, not unlike the lungs or mucus or that type of problems, but it's probably way more complicated than that. There's growing evidence that it may actually be related to the blood vessels there. So the research we're doing, rather than trying to say, okay, we're going to use different medicines to try to help with bile flows, we're actually going back to the drawing board a little bit to say, do we really understand what causes that? Because whatever 10% of kids with CF can have this evidence of that. So we're trying to really understand that better. One of the other questions I want to clearly also address is there evidence that taking Trikafta or other medicines early in life leads to liver disease down the road because of somehow liver inflammation? The answer is absolutely no evidence of that right now. As a matter of fact, we think it's probably more likely that if you're able to start early on these medicines, it's probably less likely to have liver disease down the road, but that's things we're going to have to be watching. So I just wanted to hit those liver ones. The other one was just a question multiple people asked about, is there going to be research on cross-infection which would allow people with CF to get together? And so I would say that it's early on that. We know that there is still risk of cross-infection even with less cough. At the same time, we are looking at this to just, particularly within our own organization, to say, okay, can we relax a little bit to be able to allow? And so we're thinking about that right now. We're always going to be on the side of being safe first. But we would love adults with CF to be able to participate more with things. And certainly one of those strategies is to be outside. Whitney's been helping to lead some of our thoughts. Okay, what can we look at? What can we do in this area? So we're assessing. We hear you loud and clear. We also want to make sure that we can be safe, because there still is an issue. And then obviously there's always the concern, even with Trikafta and less cough, you can have infection. So we want to always keep that balance of safety, but also opportunity. So I think we're actually over now. But how about one quick thing that you say? Hey, looking forward till the next time we're in VLC, this is something I'm excited by. So maybe, JP, we'll start on this end, work down here.
All right. Actually, I'm going to say something we haven't come up yet. I'm actually really excited by this time next year, really the first tangible steps in the next-gen registry.
The next-gen registry. Give 1 or 2 more lines.
Oh, well, that's all I need. No, I'm kidding. Next-gen registry. Basically, the work is ongoing right now, and it's not in my shop. It's mostly Dr. Farrow's, but really focused on taking the current registry and putting it on a much more robust platform so that data can be accessed by people with CF, families with CF, and also data that is captured in the registry can be really more tailored to the person. So I'm really excited. This has been a project a long time coming, and it is on the doorstep. So that sets you up.
Next year, we'll be ready to talk more about that. Yep. Whitney, what are you excited about?
I continue to be excited about ways that we can innovate in care delivery, and some of the stuff that we talked about, doing more remotely to make life easier for adults that are busy and working, and and really projecting forward to some of the needs of aging that are coming down the line. So just looking at care, innovating, and continuing to optimize best we can. Yeah.
Perfect.
I'll say our work in nonsense mutations. We've been stuck on nonsense mutations for a while. It seems like it should be able to be fixed like we've done with other mutations for modulators, and we haven't been able to do. But we've been stuck on a concept that aminoglycosides might be the drug to be able to do that. And we even supported some companies that were developing new aminoglycosides, and they failed. And they failed, but not because the concept didn't work, but because the drugs weren't getting into the blood well enough to impart their effect. What we're now seeing in the lab is aminoglycoside independent read-through of nonsense mutations, which could become essentially a new modulator for that group. I think we still have a ways to go. The activity is low, but we've broken through conceptually, have 2 drug combinations that are able to push that. And then on top of that, we now have genetic therapy companies, independent of our work, working on other diseases that can fix the codons caused by nonsense mutations at high levels of efficiency in people. And this has been done by Wave Therapeutics in the liver, where it's easy to get to. And we think that we could adopt those sorts of techniques to help certain nonsense mutations. I'm excited to see what we can do with that.
Yeah. So these are all those mutations that end with X that don't respond to those modulators. It'd be amazing. It would really shrink down that group that's not able to benefit from modulators. So I'll just say the thing I'm excited about in many ways is our team. We have challenges. You've heard all these different topics, right? But I'm just really confident in our team, confident in our partnership with you. Look, we're going to take some lumps along the way, right? Where there's some challenges, sometimes we're going to get stuff that we're excited about. Sometimes we're going to say that didn't work as well. But I'm just confident that in partnership with you, that we're going to figure it out. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep making progress. We've got that track record. We're absolutely going to do that. So I'm going to close. I'm just going to ask if we could give a round of applause to the 3 panelists and say thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
We good?
I think we're headed into break now, and then again to the next session with some of the Idea Labs. So thank you so much, and we'll try to do other questions throughout. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.